Good morning, everyone. So happy to have you here sharing this wonderful story about how we can live like the Master based on the inspiration of Swami's biography of Yogananda. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, humbly we bow to you all. Dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, we are deeply grateful for the inspiring example you have set by your own life and by the wealth of inspiring writing and speaking that you have left behind for all of us. Help us to live as you have lived, with complete dedication to God, sincerity, kindness. Help us to rise to the level of the Master in our aspirations and to walk courageously in the footsteps that he has laid down in front of us. Om. Peace. Amen. This is Monday, and every Monday I speak about how profoundly supported I feel by your enthusiasm for these broadcasts and for the books I've written, other work that I've done. One simply does as one feels guided and gives the best energy I can to it. And it's very gratifying for me to know that you are receiving Swamiji's consciousness, Master's profound teachings, and have felt inspired to support. I jokingly call Money Monday, because it's necessary for me on a regular basis to ask you if you feel inspired by this work, if you would like to help it continue. We've formed a nonprofit group called Mission of the Masters, and it operates through Patreon, which is a wonderful creative website where creative people can connect with those who have the resources to help them do their work. Eventually, Mission of the Masters will be an actual tax-deductible nonprofit, and when we reach that point, which takes some months, I'll definitely let you know. In the meantime, if you feel that this work is worth supporting, you can do it through Patreon, which is an ongoing subscription, or through one-time donations by going to Asha Joy, and you'll see there, that's my website, you'll see there clear instructions about how to proceed from that. And if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, Inner Life with Asha, again, I would be very grateful if you would do that. The response that I've received, the enthusiasm is beyond words for me to express. It's very uplifting to be able to share with others when you have been so generously blessed as I have been. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful to God and Guru and to all of you for expressing it. So now where we are is we're going through these 32 characteristics of the Master, and we're on number 26. It's very short, not insignificant, just quick to express. Swami says, Master never judged anyone. Judgment he left to God. He was truly a friend to all. There's so much implied in those 3 short sentences. When Swamiji first went to Assisi, Ananda was not, we had no work in Italy at that time. The first time Swamiji visited Assisi, which is the city that's made sacred by the presence of St. Francis and St. Clare and many other great spiritual beings, probably before and since. There's a little, when Francis first got his call from Christ the call came in the words, "Rebuild my church." And Francis took those words to mean that literally, physically, actually what Jesus said to him was, "Rebuild my church. Can't you see it's in ruins?" The fact was, the whole Catholic Church was in a state of great conflict between worldliness and true spirituality at the time. And gradually Francis came to understand that that's really what Jesus had in mind. And in fact, Francis did revitalize the whole church. But he was literally sitting in a small chapel that was falling down, an old church that was falling down. So Francis had in his mind that what Jesus wanted him to do was to put brick upon brick and rebuild these churches. So he did. He rebuilt several churches, including something which is called the Portiuncula, which means the little portion. And the little Portiuncula church, which is a small one-room church, now sits inside this enormous cathedral. So you go in this huge, beautiful cathedral, which is just the way the European churches can be. And inside of it, there's this humble little chapel. And then you can go inside the humble little chapel, which is the same actual physical place that Francis himself, with his own hands, helped rebuild. So it was around 76 or 77, that would have been, no, it might have been 1972, actually. I have all these dates in my head because of the book I wrote. Swamiji went to Assisi for the first time in the early 70s. And he went and sat in the Portiuncula, and he said what he felt from Francis, as Francis, was this extraordinary sweetness, is how he described it. And he was so touched by the consciousness that he felt there that he prayed to Francis, how can you be so sweet? And, by loving all, but then he felt Francis say to him, by never judging. Above all, by never judging. So that's always been a very interesting thought, because immediately the mind says, well, you have to be able to tell the difference between a fool and a wise man. So to understand what this meant by never judging, you have to understand that there's a difference between discriminating and judging. Because discrimination is a fundamental part of the spiritual path of self-realization, because we are always trying to discern the difference between delusion and wisdom. And we are always trying to feel, what is dharma? What is right action that will lead to expanded consciousness in everything that we do? And having a very sharp, clear mind and a very introspective nature that helps you to be aware of what we are truly feeling in all circumstances. All of these are extremely important qualities. In one of the earlier series of broadcasts that I did, when I was talking about Swami's encapsulation of the concept of crystal clarity, that comes in the middle of his book about money magnetism, and he has this one sentence in there which has been very helpful to me, just the way it's put. Muddy thoughts and feelings lead to chaos. And so he wrote about crystal clarity, and you can go back and find that section. It was, who knows when it was sometime this year. And it's been very, very helpful to me. So don't for a moment think that the lack of judgment means that we have muddy thinking. Judgment, in fact, you see, well, let me phrase it differently. To have true lack of judgment requires a very clear understanding of what you're dealing with, and then rising to a higher level above that. See, what happens is that people think, if I say that this person is not operating from the highest level, if I say that this person has an unscrupulous nature and is trying to take something from me, if we are afraid to say this person is cruel in the way that they behave, this person has no compassion, those are facts, because every one of us has within us the same spark of divinity. Each one of us is equally loved by God. But that doesn't mean that every sentient being that you know is living up to that highest potential. Some of them are desecrating it in extreme ways, and that is just an objective fact. Because we're all jivas on this journey, we're all individual sparks of divinity on this journey from delusion to God realization. And it's progressive and it's directional. And there are many souls that you will meet who are very, very free of delusion. They have transcended delusion in countless ways. And there are other people that you will meet who are totally enmeshed. And every decision they make is leading them to greater suffering and farther away from the light. This is an objective fact. And as Sri Yukteswar put it, saintliness is not dumbness. To be saintly, to not judge people, does not mean that you don't see them for who they are. Judgment is when you accept, when you close your heart. Judgment says, that's not a clear enough way to say it. Let me think about this for a minute. Judgment says that you are making a mistake, and therefore you are a bad person. You're doing bad actions, but that doesn't make you a bad person. Judgment also is when we don't have compassion. Judgment is when we reject and often try to crush, in some way. Well, I'll just use the word reject, can go very, very far. And we do it with a harshness. It's not motivated by love. It's motivated by fear. It's motivated by a desire to expunge that reality from life. I don't want this to exist. Judgment is always a reflection of something inside of ourselves that we are not able to calmly accept. And then when we see it manifested around us, we fear it and we try to crush it. We try to make it not exist anymore. Now, don't misunderstand in Master's talking even about higher ages. He talks about the necessity. This is actually something that he writes in an article about, advancing times. There will still be a great need, he says, for an international police force that can discipline bullies, is how he puts it. And he's talking about bullies on the level of dictators, national leaders, people who start wars, people who try to drag their whole nation into aggressive actions that will lead to terrible destruction. We will need an international police force to discipline the bullies. So it's not like Master could say, oh, it's all the same. Oh, we're all children of God. If someone is being a channel for evil, that evil action must be stopped, or at least as guided and appropriate action is taken. But Master's compassion for the evildoer is limitless. He is truly a friend to all. Now think of it like this, and this is where the fact that we speak of God as a father and a mother helps us to understand. When you are a parent, you have a responsibility to train children in such a way that they will be able to move through life effectively. There was a woman that I know, and unfortunately, she was very unclear on the concept of what it meant to be a mother. And she had 2 children, but, quote, I don't like to hear them cry, is how she put it. So the children very quickly learned that all they had to do was cry, and their mother would give in to any of their demands. Children, by definition, are immature, and they don't have a sort of a functioning understanding of how the world works. They have a very short attention span and a very limited ability for delayed gratification, and virtually no understanding of the implications of their own decisions or actions. So they will often be very upset about the decisions that their parents make on their behalf and the conditions that are then imposed on them. And if they can cry and have instant gratification for whatever thing it is that they want, they never gain any functioning understanding of how to move through this world. And unfortunately, the consequences were predictable. And the people, those children struggled, into adulthood through their lives, all because mommy didn't want to hear them cry. But a true loving parent doesn't think the child is terrible for being two. It just says the child is two, and therefore we have to respond appropriately. The child is 6. We have to respond appropriately. But the parent does it not out of judgment, but out of calm understanding of what's required of the parent, what's required of the child, what's going to be required of the child. But in disciplining his or her own child, the parent is acting as the best possible friend. Because we're saying, I have a perspective you don't have, and therefore this is what's necessary. So Master was not at all inclined to spoil people, and he was not at all inclined to whitewash people's bad actions. He just did not make his commitment to them, his commitment of love, his commitment of help, his commitment of friendship, conditional upon that person's behavior. It was given first and given completely. And how this comes across, and this is how it ends up working, is that, because I say this because I knew this from Swamiji, you feel so loved. Master was just able to make people feel loved. He still does. You feel in Master that you have a best friend. Even you just read Autobiography of a Yogi, or now with Swami Kriyananda, you listen to him talk in his recordings, you read the books that he's written, you invite him into your meditation, Master, Babaji. In Autobiography of a Yogi, it says, anyone who says the name of Babaji with devotion attracts an instant blessing. If we have any desire, any receptivity to spirituality, the masters just simply rush in to help us. But that doesn't mean they don't see us as we are. Now, do you see the difference between judgment and when we're afraid to discriminate? It's because we have an inclination to judge, and we have an inclination to judge. This is the way, because I've had to fight my way through all of this. I have a personal understanding of it. There were so many conflicting cross currents in my own heart that when I would see other people behave in ways that were my own ways of behaving, that were issues that I hadn't yet resolved in myself, I really wanted that behavior to disappear. That's how I began to feel it. And because I wasn't able to disappear it from my own life, if I saw someone else expressing it, I wanted it to disappear from their life. But in that, I lost track of the person that was expressing it. Evil and the one who does evil are two different realities, you see. So it's not the sinner that we hate, so to speak. It's the sin. I don't think hating it at all is a very good idea. But it's like, you are misguided. I've had that thought about some public figures, not people that I know personally, whose public policies seem profoundly lacking in compassion. And if the public figure has the karma to be able to have all this power and position and adulation and all of these other things, I mean, obviously they've gotten the karma to have this position. But now, using that position with so little sense of compassion and kindness, you know from the laws of karma and reincarnation that the person is going to have to suffer. Because the reason we suffer is so that we'll learn compassion. I can again attest to that. Just, you have to, you get to feel what it feels like. And gradually over time, at first in the karmic evolution of things, when something evil is done to you, you just wait for your chance for revenge. And then you exercise that cruelty on someone else and you feel so satisfied that you've gotten to pay them back. And then, of course, that lack of compassion creates a boomerang effect, and then you get to suffer again. Swamiji talks about a dream he had once, and it was a profound dream. And he said he had, in this dream, it was like many lifetimes ago, he had a best friend. And they were devoted to each other, but then some misunderstanding developed, and that best friend betrayed Swamiji in some past life. So the next life, Swamiji was in a position to exercise that same disregard and cruelty on his friend. And then in the next life, the friend had the power, and he exercised all the cruelty against Swami. And then, it was just going, and then Swami finally saw, wait, why don't we just stop? And so in the dream, Swami just said, I release it. I release it all. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I love you. I wish you well. And then Swami said he woke up with this tremendous sense of freedom. So I think of this public figure, and I don't like the policies that are being executed. I think people are being severely hurt. I'm not political at all. I'm thinking entirely about the person himself and the consequences of his life, of using power without compassion. And so it's going to happen. Something's going to happen because he has to suffer and learn. But I don't need to dislike him. I don't need to exercise any negative force toward him. This is exactly what Swami said. Master never judged. He left the judgment to God. What he meant by that was not that, boy, God is going to show him. He has more power than I. He's really going to show him. He meant that karma will take its course. And that because God loves all of us equally, He's a true father and a true mother. And therefore he will discipline us as needed to bring us to our own potential for maturity. And when we really think about it, we think, who is hurt by all this judgment? By the time the judgment reaches the person to whom it is directed, those negative thoughts can cause distress. But where the real power of negativity resides is at the point of origin. And so who is hurt most profoundly by dark and negative thoughts? Me. Because then that's the world I live in. I live in a world in which I dislike and reject and condemn and wish ill to anybody who doesn't conform to my idea of what they ought to do. What a terrible world to live in. Swami, when he was praying in the portiuncula, how could you be so sweet? Francis says, well, I never judged. I wasn't afraid to see reality for what it is, because there is a lot of dark and shadow. But even the evildoers, we respond like a loving mother. And that loving mother can be quite stern, if necessary. So don't think when you stop judging that you suddenly become a doormat and allow anybody to do any fool thing that they want to do. No, quite the opposite. In fact, quite freely and strongly, you can stand up and say, this is not right, and I will not accept it. Because there is no judgment. It's, I love you as a brother, I love you as a sister, I pray for you and hope that you find salvation, but not in my life, not anywhere near me. I'm simply not going to allow it. This is not something that I will accept. And that's where actually it's very interesting. It's when we stop judging is when we can start seeing. and start acting properly. Because we have to act properly for our own well-being and for the sake of others. It's not friendship to allow a person to think that this is acceptable behavior. I mean, this is the cycle of codependency that people get in, that people behave in ways that are absolutely inappropriate. And because we don't want to judge, we don't say absolutely not. But when we stop judging and wish them well, then we can. It's what I call, I'm very clean within myself. I'm just clean and clear. This is not going to happen. And it's a great spiritual exercise to find this wonderful balance point where you really are a friend to all, as Swami put it so beautifully for Master. Why would we not be? The only reason we have an aversion is not because that person's soul is actually different than mine or dark. It's because they are misguided. And they are tuning into the wrong energy, and they are expressing it incorrectly. And they will suffer for that. I mean, this is where all of it has to work together. The grace of God, karma, and reincarnation. One of the many reasons why the teaching of karma and reincarnation, which is a very challenging teaching, because if karma is true anywhere, it's true everywhere. And it's a very challenging teaching. We have to have a great deal of courage in order to be able to embrace it completely and gain from it the calmness and the courage that comes with it. But we don't have to be the ones. Everybody's life comes in balance eventually. So God doesn't need us to have these dark thoughts toward people. We need to become like Divine Mother herself. This is my naughty child. And we have to discipline my naughty child and close down their capacity to be a channel for darkness and teach them through their own experience the superior satisfaction of being a channel for the light. And aren't we glad that they're getting the opportunity to learn it? It just takes the whole idea of right and wrong and all of that and just elevates it to a completely different level. This is the extraordinary breaking down of limitation that a profound understanding of the spiritual path will really give us. So when we have, like, as we say about Master here, he never judged. He left the judgment to God. He was the friend of all. Isn't that a wonderful aspiration for all of us? God bless you, my friend.